Hopefully not a ghost, Elliot Roth. Mic check. Is anybody here named Mike? Mike, raise your hand. Mike, anybody? Jokes. Somebody's gonna start beatboxing here. What's up, everybody? How many of you know about algae? Give it up for algae. Pretty good. As David kindly said, I made the dumb decision to live on only algae for a week and lived to tell about it. This is Super Slime Me, a journey into the slime sublime. So I have a background in synthetic biology. I've found a means of expressing myself through DNA ever since I was younger. I started tinkering around with DNA as more of a creative medium and whatnot, and really love the idea of biology as an expressive medium, a creative medium, and something that you can use to explore different things. In particular, I find myself really food insecure a couple of years ago, and I built this little laboratory in a friend's garage space, and so I leaned into that laboratory as a means of helping provide for some of my basic nutrition, and ended up discovering the joys of algae, growing spirulina and feeding myself on a protein-rich concoction that I made myself. And so that was inspiration for a lot of my research. I've gone on and conducted some algae work in space. This is me living in a simulated moon habitat on the side of a volcano in Hawaii. Actually, one of the people who lived in the habitat with me is somewhere in the audience, so if you see her, say hi. I ended up growing algae in a little bioreactor system and feeding myself and my crewmates in there and absorbing the CO2 that I was breathing out. And sadly, they wouldn't let me grow it on my own pee, but I tried. I've also conducted different research and studies in developing countries. This is a study we did in Ethiopia in conjunction with a professor of infant nutrition and maternal nutrition. This was to feed refugees, and I worked with the World Food Program on identifying how do you actually grow enough nutrition in a tiny space, very, very densely, in these kind of low resource environments. And so, truth be told, I really love algae, and it doesn't get as good as a rep as many people believe. It's really, that green good, that sticky icky, that good. And I just want more people to know about it. And so I started a company with that specifically in mind as a means of finding different uses for algae and using it to replace some of the petrochemicals that we use on a day-to-day basis. And so, in particular, I wanted to make an impact with all of my research. And one of the key things that I always came back to was nutrition. And in particular, this movie really inspired me. I saw it recently again. How many of you have seen the movie? Raise your hand. Oh, wow, most of the room. So if you don't know, this is a documentary made by Morgan Spurlock back in mid-2000s. And he ate a diet of only McDonald's for a month, gained 18 pounds over the course of the month, ended up becoming pre-diabetic from a completely vegan diet, had a whole lot of problems end up happening over that month, and recorded his entire experience and ended up publishing that, and it actually led to McDonald's removing the Super Size Me option from their menu. So good on Morgan Spurlock, give him a hand. Yeah. So what I wanted to do was kind of look at how do we actively change our diets, and in particular embrace the bottom of the food pyramid and look at how can algae actually be used in our day-to-day lives, because all the people here probably have tried seaweed in some kind of way, right? Give it up for seaweed, yeah. But you haven't really tried the thousands and thousands of species of algae that are out there that are conventionally consumed all over the world. And so in particular, one of the key problems and challenges that we have is malnutrition in the United States. So this is obesity, and people are getting fatter and fatter over time. We're eating the wrong things, right? Not only are we not eating the right kind of nutrition, but we're eating too much of the wrong kind of nutrition. In addition, outside of this epidemic, climate change is also a big deal. I don't know if you guys heard, but it's getting hot in here, so hot. So take a volume blow. So 23% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from animal agriculture in particular. So how do we go about finding suitable replacements for those kind of things? And so I put it in my mind to try to use algae to combat the dystopia that's facing us. And I watched The 100. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if this is going to play. But this is a scene from The 100 where they like grow algae. I don't know if this is going to play or anything like that. We'll see when or not. Exactly, mic drop. So I don't know if this is gonna play, but we'll give it a shot.
Bellamy, something's happening.
Here, I'll scroll ahead to where...
We're in.
There you go.
I missing too. Jasper should have been with us on the ring.
Never mind, don't worry about it. This doesn't matter. This doesn't really matter. Skip it, skip ahead. Let's see if I can go back to the original slide. Oh no, mistakes were made. All right, there you go. Okay, so in essence, he says in the 100, we need to make algae, not war. And I thought that was really sweet because in all of these dystopian movies, whether or not it's Stowaway or The 100 or whatever, they end up using algae to end up surviving and live on a diet of mostly algae. So in the event of an apocalypse, grow algae. It's what I did during the pandemic. You can too. And so I launched this campaign on experiment.com and raised some money to kind of like supply myself with enough materials to live on a diet of only algae for a month. And luckily, thanks to all these backers, I ended up raising enough money to supply for all the nutrition that I needed. And in particular, ended up identifying the fact that there's hundreds of edible algae species out there, ranging from macroalgae to microalgae, cyanobacteria, and everything in between. Our green little aquatic plants have the ability to feed us in all kinds of situations. And so you have all of these edible plants, aquatic plants, and then you also have algae oil, which is a really good caloric source of food, which I ended up using quite a bit during my diet. And then you end up having this like beautiful algae powder. And so these algae powders can be used as a protein replacement, end up blending it in all kinds of different recipes that I'll talk about in a little bit. So did a whole lot of background research and I came up with exactly the amount of nutrition I would need and a blend of various species of algae that would supply me all the nutrients that I needed for a standard diet. And low activity, didn't think too much of it. I was gonna try for as long as I could go on just algae alone. Ignore the percentages, they're not entirely right. I was just trying to use a nutritional facts calculator for all of this. So this is the recommended daily amount. So with all of this prep work done, I was like, all right, let's get going. Let's get dancing with it. Let's get grooving and shaking and get green. And so I started coming up with some recipes. So for breakfast, we have the protein shake. This is a mixture of spirulina and chlorella, and basically it provides for all my basic protein requirements. How many of you have heard of spirulina? Give it up. Woo! All right, yeah, it's good morning, you know? Gets you started, gets you going. I work with a lot of algae farmers, and so I found a farmer that was willing to supply this to me. And in particular, it's important to have chlorella with a broken cell wall, so keep that in mind if you're buying any of it. Pretty neutral taste. I then went up the coast to Sonoma and ended up harvesting a whole lot of different seaweed up on the coast. So you have a chance to sample some of that over at the table over there. So if you haven't had some, I have some great seaweed pickles that I ate as a snack. So this is Cystocera over here. Made some kelp kombu, some dulse bacon, and some bladderwrack, which I turned into nice meaty burgers. And then sea lettuce was kind of my saving grace. I ended up using that as a means of making salads for myself. Pretty tasty, very, very crunchy, some seaweed kind of chips. And then kombu was delicious. It was like this nutrient broth, kind of like bone broth as well. So if you ever had any sort of like bone broth, has the same kind of effect. It's kind of like miso soup. It's the main stock that you find in miso soup, and this consumed all over the world. Really, really dense source of nutrients and nutrition. I also started like fiddling around a little bit. I was like, all right, you know, I have all these species of algae, might as well try to make a bread, you know? So I ended up blending it up, putting it together, Isn't exactly like bread, but like if you squint, maybe. So you boil puree and fry, you end up getting something like a little bit bready, but it's very filling, kind of hard to eat, but you know, it's good for you, real good. Has that B12 as well. And then, like, one of my favorite things is this dulse bacon. And dulse is this awesome seaweed grown off the coast of the UK and Scotland. You can try a sample over there, over at the table. It kind of tastes like jerky or bacon. It's really, really, really good. And then finally, played around with some chlorella, made some cheeses, made some dairy products, made some other things like that. And this is pure algae. This is no additional ingredients or anything like that. Just kind of like blending algae, alginate, carrageenan, other things like that are algae extracts. And then finally, experimented, and this isn't a real picture because they didn't turn out so well, but algae meatballs, the food of the future. Real tasty, real delicious. And so one of the things I really wanted to do was experiment with this idea of N of 1 studies. And so whoever's a scientist in the audience knows that there's inherent bias in testing things on yourself. However, one of the surprising things is that tons of Nobel Prizes, a surprising amount of Nobel Prizes have been awarded for these N of 1 studies of people experimenting on themselves. And in particular, it's because I believe some of the best science happens when people are really brave and put themselves out there and try something new. And so in particular, what I wanted to do was collect as much data on myself as a means of inspiring people, maybe not to completely replace their entire diets, but, you know, start substituting some algae in their diets and inspire some people to experiment with some things. And so initially I started with a metabolic test right here. I think that's, a laser. So this is a full metabolic test. And I did a metabolic screen before and after the diet. And so you can see here, kidney function, all of the different blood albumin levels and other things like that. And so wanted to check up on liver enzyme health, iodine levels, thyroid levels, as much data as possible for myself. So I ended up collecting glucose monitoring. I did a continuous glucose monitor as well. This is from Levels. The Forward Health was kind of my primary care physician too. And then these are my glucose levels over time. So as you see, it held relatively constant over a couple of days. And in particular, between like 80 and 90 milligrams per deciliter. And in particular, that is kind of low glucose. And, looking back, I think it was because I really wasn't eating as much as I should have. The sheer volume of things needed to be higher. And there's a whole lot of things that I'll go into in a little bit. I also have a fitness tracker. Most everybody has a watch of some sort now. Kind of amazing little things right here. And so I can measure everything from my overall sleep pattern, which as you see, and like most people, I don't get great sleep in particular. This is overall weight over time, right here. So I ended up losing about 7 pounds over the course of the diet. But right here, my weight bounced back after I started eating more algae. And then right here, I try to average around 10,000 steps or so. It's pretty easy in the city of San Francisco. Wonderful place you had here. I moved here about 3 months ago from LA, so really love that public transit. Give it up for trains, right? Yeah, we need more of those. Trains, choo-choo. But the question most everyone asks is about poop. Everybody loves asking about poop. So one of the wonderful measurements is something called the Bristol Stool Scale. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. Yeah. All my type 4s and type 5s in the house. Yeah. Right there. Hydration. Let's go. So in particular, what I did was I sent crap chats to anyone who wanted during the course of the diet, which were really, really pictures of poop, if you were real interested. And so in particular, tracked and measured a calendar of my bowel movements. So yeah, like very revealing on stage, wearing my heart on my sleeve, wearing bearing my guts to you, quite literally. So in particular, you can see I was relatively regular, like every other day. I just did it for a week on the recommendation of my doctor. I was like, I'm going to do it for a month. And she was like, please, just start with a week and see where it goes. So I'm planning another week relatively soon. So in particular, some of the interesting things that ended up happening, though, is that I measured my gut microbiome. And one of the really intriguing things, just after a couple of days, just seriously 2 days from one bowel movement to another, my gut microbiome started changing over, which is really interesting. And in particular, the pathobionts which is kind of like pathogenic bacteria, started going down over time. And then the diversity of my gut started going up, which kind of makes sense. You know, I'm eating different things, kind of changing it up. And I did a water fast going into this. It was a 2-day water fast as a means of just getting a stable state in my gut. And started like seeing these changes happen pretty rapidly. And so one of the key things that is important to note is that a lot of these algal species have different types of starches, different types of polysaccharides. So these are sulfonated polysaccharides like fucoidin, and they end up really helping your overall gut health. So if you have anything like IBS or other things like that, it's kind of interesting to experiment with adding some algae into your diet because terrestrial sources of gut bacteria are very different. So here's some of the conclusions of what happened. So like I said, 2-day water fast to start. Wasn't really getting enough calories there. It was really hard to consume the sheer volume of algae. And then I did my best to try to recreate thousands of years of culinary tradition in the span of a week. But anybody who's spent any time in a kitchen is pretty rough. So I'm really looking to experiment with more recipes over time. In particular, I wound up being pretty tired and grumpy in ketosis. If anybody's ever gone on a ketogenic diet, they're pretty prickly and ornery. I see some head nods in the audience. And so like just getting the sheer volume of input was really hard. But some of the future casting, some of the things that I'm looking for is anybody willing to try this out? Anybody willing to try algae in other ways? Woo, awesome. Be really interesting to see additional recipes come out of this, additional ideas. It's part of the reason why I'm here is just talking about algae, sharing with everybody. It'd be really cool to grow everything that you need on site in a tiny amount of space. Kind of the ideal would be as a means of self-actualizing. One of the basic needs of people really is food, and food should be a basic human right. And so being able to produce everything that you need just right there is kind of like an amazing thing to think of. And that means that we can apply that in extreme environments like those refugee camps, like those space stations that I was talking about. And so bring in more recipes and better data on the next go around. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, you can follow along. My social media is right there, or my email, feel free to email me right there. My company is Spirit Inc., and we produce all kinds of different algae-related goodness. So feel free to follow us there. I recently moved to the city, so looking for new friends. And with that, thank you.
Fascinating. All right, we have a little bit of time for questions. Yes.
Regarding growing your own algae at home, what does that involve?
Yeah, so the question was regarding growing your own algae at home, what does that involve? Really, just you need some salt water, you need a tank of some sort, you need a light, you need a bubbler, and then if you're going to harvest it and eat it, you just need some sort of sieve to go about harvesting it. I highly recommend growing spirulina. It's one of the easiest to grow. And we used to sell kits for that, but if you want, there's somebody by the name of Algae Research Supply who ends up supplying kits. So highly recommend it if you want kind of like a stable source of protein in the event of apocalypse. I was doing that and making my own alcohol during the pandemic, just in case of apocalypse.
So this raises a very important question. Can algae make booze?
Great question. So I fiddled around a little bit. I actually just started a blackberry wine ferment just for fun. I'm really interested in the ability of algae of producing really novel compounds. So we were talking backstage about some fun things.
It's true.
So yeah, always curious about those kind of experiments. I have seen a seaweed vodka out there. So if you are interested, look that up.
Salty. Question.
Yeah, hit me.
Kind of about the experiment and sort of the science, the structure of the science, which is particularly with what you found about like your microbiome improving. How much of that do you think you could actually say is about eating algae in particular versus just having cut out so many other things?
That's a great question.
In your diet is then different type of question. I love seaweed, but there are only so many like ways that I actually eat it. Is there any like kind of food snack commercially available or homemade that you would recommend that maybe people haven't thought of?
Ooh, okay. So 2 questions. One was a question on the gut microbiome. Was that just a factor of cutting out things in my diet that were potentially harmful? Granted, I don't know. It's an N of 1 study. Who knows? Part of the rationale behind coming in front of an audience and talking about it is to potentially get additional people to test different things, try different things out. I also went through a slight IRB process beforehand, and so caution. Asterisk. Be cautious with your own body, without a doubt.
Nerd Knight assumes no responsibility for
right.
safety.
This is legal disclaimers all around. I would say that by cutting out different bacteria and not putting in additional bacteria, whatever went into my body was algae and water. And so kind of interesting to see what populations of bacteria colonize my gut. I would love to see longer time periods. That would be really interesting. The other thing that you ended up asking was species of seaweed or species of algae that might be interesting to use as a snack. I have a couple over there. So dulse is really easy. It's kind of like seaweed bacon, seaweed jerky. Nori is always really, really good. Wakame, arame. These are standard algae that you can buy in grocery stores. I found some kelp noodles, which were really good at a local Asian grocery store, and ended up finding some red algae powder that I was trying to turn into spaghetti sauce. Well, just did not turn out the way that I really wanted. But I'm constantly experimenting, and I think that in terms of a snack, it's always good to munch on some nori chips.
I can vouch for all of the snacks. They were all very delicious, and you should try them out.
Yeah, I got some seaweed pickles back there that are freshly caught off the coast of Sonoma. I hunted them down especially just for everybody tonight.
Very tiny spears. Just. All right, one more question.
Yeah.
One more question. Yes.
Are there any algae-based recipes that you want to try in the future?
Yeah, great question. So I ended up getting a lot of this type of algae in Sonoma called bladderwrack, and that's a local algae that's really high in iodine and iron in particular. And so I tried some meatball stuff that didn't turn out, but I really want to try more meat patty kind of things. That would be really, really intriguing. Some of the breads that I tried were okay. I did a pancake recipe that was pretty good. And so those are the kind of things that I really want to try, because I think that in terms of the human diet, some of the staples that we eat on a day-to-day basis are based in grains in particular, or based in the high protein stuff. And so to make something really familiar, it was kind of sad going out with friends in the city, and they would go to a restaurant and I'd sit there and munch on my algae snacks and whatnot. So the social aspect of food is really important. Would love to get people together to test out a bunch of recipes too. So feel free to email me about that as well. There you go.
Fantastic. All right. Well, once again, big round of applause for Elliot. Thank you. And we will come back.